Remember not to say anything inappropriately. You never know who's recording. So, hi everyone. We're done. We're good. We made it.
Actually, you know what?
What? Oh, sorry. I could take my mask off if it helps for the test because
Yeah, hold on.
I will not. No, we're just gonna. Okay, I'm talking and talking and talking and talking and trying to not say anything inappropriate. Okay. Thank you.
Blah, 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 thank you. Gifty, gift, oh, yeah, blah, 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 thank you. Gifty, gifty. Gifty, gifty. Clappy, clappy. And now I would like to introduce the chairs of CHI 2023. I'm not even going to say your names. The chairs of CHI 2023. Which, I go off this way? Yeah.
More Disney-fied, I noticed, right? Yeah.
Okay.
So what's...
Wait, I
yeah.
don't know because you might.
Oh, I forgot to change the slide anyways. Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah. Okay.
Oh, right.
Roxanne, two things. Do they have cue in music?
So I want to ask you about that because I don't have any German type of music for you. Right. But we could do. Because we have a lot of German. That we already have.
We have music, so I don't think we need necessarily music.
Okay, we will do that. Okay.
And I forgot to switch the slide. No, it's the big green. Yeah, yeah.
They will. Oh, they will. Oh.
If I forget to change the slide, I'll come back and say, whoops, I forgot to change the slide. I'm waiting for the music. All right. That's That's very short. All right. Blah, blah, blah. Thank you, dot, blah, gifty, gifty. Blah, clappy, clappy. All right. And now I'd like to introduce the chairs of CHI 2023. Boom. Clappy, clappy.
Should the slide. And then the next one, I think we need to...
But the slide is not...
It is, so it's very.
Yes, but it's not...
But it's not there.
Okay. This is Kaiser Venenen.
And this is Albrecht Schmidt, and we are your CHI 23 general chairs.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And,
okay.
and I think we
yeah,
have
so
to,
you
we have
really
to
have
also,
to be.
And I think we
come
have to
close.
switch it to this once we get up.
Yeah, that's right. So it really, Regan needs to put this one on so that then we will switch.
And basically, before I say something, I switch to this. I switch to this and say, this is Kaiser Venenen.
And this is Albrecht Schmidt, and we are your CHI 23 general chairs.
Okay.
Clapping.
Yeah, we didn't want to go to the cues for the videos, and blah, 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 cues, blah, 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 so it has to be.
No, but this is not yet the video. Next
No,
comes.
I'm just saying,
Yeah,
we
okay.
need to be quick.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, right.
By Alan.
I know. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All
So
right.
this is, yeah.
Okay, and the theme of CHI, I guess I won't be talking through it. Theme of CHI 23 is reconnecting. And then blah, 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 blah.
And we will be in Hamburg, Germany, in the Congress Center, blah, 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 23, 28, blah. And no. And now we get some impressions from Hamburg.
We don't see it here.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Aus.
And with this, we invite our technical program chairs. Oh, no, we go to the back. No, no.
This is Anisha Peters.
And this is Tesh Guyal.
And this is Carola Christensen. Twist this, all right.
Well, for 2023, we strive for diversity and inclusion in our team with a goal towards globalization.
Over to you, Perola. Sorry, we completely forgot.
Where's Pirola?
I think I pressed it, but nothing happened.
Don't press, you just say, you say
Yeah.
over to Perola,
And then
he's
they-
on video.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Okay.
so over to you, Perola. Should do that trick, right? Okay.
Hello. The CHI conference is the premier venue for human-computer interaction. CHI has many different venues to cater for different styles of research. Whatever your research style, please submit your best work to CHI 2023. This is the foundation of an excellent conference.
Our website is live now with all this information and more. We plan to engage more broadly with parts of community, including practitioners just like me. Some call for papers are ready today already, so get cracking. You will briefly saw some of the diverse team we have put together. Now you get to meet some of them.
So I think the queuing is, so you're going to meet some of them and then the video. And you come also, Tesh, you go to the back.
Yeah.
Okay, so at this point when we are coming out, there should be the video playing
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
Okay, and now?
Can we try it with the video and music? And
Ihren Weg zum Horizont hielt man für UFOs aus dem All. Warum schickte ein General Fliegerstaffeln hinterher? Alarm zu geben, wenn's so wär. Dabei waren dort am Horizont 99 Luftballons.
And then they should take it in English. Like,
99 Düsenflieger, jeder war ein großer Krieger, hielten sich für Captain Kirk. Es gab ein großes Feuer.
See you in Germany.
Shall we do that together? Like,
I don't think we can do that.
yeah, yeah,
See you,
yeah.
to-
See you
see you in Germany.
See you in Germany.
Okay.
What part should we walking up on?
And then basically we could walk up outside.
The sequence, and I do it with her now. Physical committee, and then the video plays and we're walking.
Okay.
We all get in, and then the Kai thing changes.
Right.
And then the music is already taping. Once the music stops, then you guys say see you in Germany.
See you.
And I think we could also have the question is, so you should also stay here that you're visible.
No, but if we,
No,
I
because-
think we should probably stand here while the committee comes to the stage.
Yeah, okay.
And but I think you should also be visible. So maybe, yeah.
I forget that, but I
Yeah.
can be. Okay.
I didn't see the video of this. Was it playing? I guess I
They figured it out.
Okay.
So I think this is good. If this is
Yeah.
very good.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Eyes are job done. This is all that 2023 has to do, right?
It's recorded. We
just-
you are playing that.
And then I start walking, and at the same time, the video is already on with the music on all. You're all on stage, everything is complete. Once you're ready, you change start, and the music will start taping now. Kaisa and Albert come back and say, see you in Germany. And then
And then there's never a physical committee. But percent, I never say physical committee. I never say physical committee. I say now you get to meet some of them.
it's okay, like I'm going to be here, I will walk first, so people
Okay.
start walking.
Okay, but you need to know that it's now you get to meet some of them. I never say anything like physical committee. Meet some of them. I think it will look good, yeah. Yeah.
Everyone aligned to your left. When do we get off stage? I mean, if Optimus is everything.
Check, check, check. 1, 2.
It's better if they don't.
Can we have silence, please? Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage your CHI 2022 Technical Program Chairs, David Ayman Shama and Caroline Appert.
Is that good? Nice. They're going to play it back.
Welcome to the stage your CHI 2022 Technical Program Chairs, David Ayman Shama and Caroline Appert.
Does that work?
Please welcome to the stage.
Thank you, sir, for that. So that replaces, well, you know what it does, right? Yes. Thank you.
I need a minute. I need a moment. Hold on, I need a minute to do this. Yes, yes, yes.
Welcome to the stage your CHI 2022 Technical Program Chairs, David Ayman Shama and Caroline Appert.
When the saints go marching in, when the saints go marching in. Oh, hello.
What?
Oh, you start?
Okay. No,
oh,
you
wait, I
start.
start. Okay, okay. See, without music, I'm nothing. Hi, thanks for coming to CHI 2022. Anyone that's here or afar?
It is you, the attendees, who make this a successful conference every year.
And we are incredibly proud of the program and all the committees and authors who helped make the first CHI possible.
Now, we'd like to announce the award recognitions that were voted on during the conference.
Here's some names I can't pronounce.
So
I thought we were just going to rank through it.
we just run through it? Okay. So student game competition for the winners, blah, blah.
Research competition winner, and then some runner-ups.
And in the other category, you have to say that first graduate category, no,
Oh, right.
yeah. So, and yes, for the student research competition, we also have the graduate category and one winner, blah, blah.
We'll cover that. And for interactivity, the jury's best demo recognition goes to this winner and runner-ups.
Come on, all right. And, oh, we should fix that. Okay. The people also voted for their preferred demos, and so here is our winner and two runner-ups.
And now let me welcome back to the stage the 2022 General Chairs of Chi. It was a bit George Kai there.
Group hug, bring it all in.
All right, thank you, Iman and Caroline. So this week, we've seen a lot of grace.
People have been happy to see each other, have been patient with tech failures, and have greeted old and new friends with open arms.
We appreciate the session chairs, AV staff, and support staff who worked through all these problems throughout the week.
All week, we've been especially touched by graduate students who have been invigorated by the sky. Like these ones.
Like these. Thanks to all the people who attended online. We're all figuring out what hybrid means for conferences. We stumbled many times this week, but speakers always got up and kept going. We appreciate you.
And thanks to our SVs, whom you've seen working hard, very hard over the week, both online and here. They've been essential in keeping this complex operation running as smoothly as we managed, and always with a smile, even under stressful circumstances. And of course, you didn't see their smiles through the masks.
We pause to remember for a moment Ed Lank, who passed recently. In his honor, we also pause to remember all the harms that have been done to us by the pandemic for the past 2.5 years. Many of us have lost opportunities, have faced emotional and physical health problems, have lost loved ones. But at the same time, we have had loved ones who have helped us through this and who we have loved through this. So I'm going to ask you to take 10 seconds just to remember somebody who loved you through the pandemic. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And now it is our pleasure to introduce our closing keynote speaker for CHI 2022, Dr. Paola Aurora.
Dr. Aurora is professor and chair in technology, values and global media cultures at Erasmus University, Rotterdam. Her work focuses on digital usage on global south, including digital cultures, inequality, and governance.
Dr. Aurora is the author of several books, including The Next Billion Users, Digital Life Beyond the West, and Leisure Commons.
During the talk, you can submit questions to the Slido form in Hub. Cliff and I will go through the questions after the talk. Well, join us now in welcoming Dr. Aurora.
Thank you. All right. Yeah. Yes.
I turn it over to you.
Yeah, you can have to sit,
Yeah.
turn your back to
So, of course. Yeah. All right. Okay. All right, let's get started. So, thank you very much. Thank you for the invite, for everyone to be here. And it's an honor to do this keynote. All right, great. So I've been listening, I've been following the discussions online as I made my way from Amsterdam to out here, and I have to say I had to repivot my conversation to that of inclusive design in the next billion to resonate with some important discussions that have been happening over these last few days. And then I want to ask some questions to the audience, so I'm going to say, all right, so let's do some old-fashioned, one sec, let me see. Right. Yeah, let's do some old-fashioned, gathering of, the room, and let's see, and then I'm going to ask, so how many here have done work or are doing work on the Global South? Then, make some noise, and then basically another couple of questions, and then I'll start this talk, move on to this. I don't need to go through that, right? Just... Yeah, so blah, blah, blah. phenomenal. We all should subscribe to data as a new oil. It's an amazing thing. No, it's not. Okay. And so this, da-da-da-da. Oh, okay. So I had actually put the industry aid agencies as like each comes separately, but I guess it's fine. I mean, all right. So, okay, da-da-da, da-da. Blah, blah, blah. A lot of blah, blahing. And more, and more. The end, right? I hope you're all profoundly impacted, and yes, now you can give me all your money, $1 each, that makes it $1 billion, and then I can retire, and thank you very much. So I don't need to do this stuff again, all right? Okay, and then where do I go? Okay, so I click and put it on this.
So you'll clap, clap, clap. They'll come up.
All right.
That end, if you want to come up from that end.
And leave this here.
Leave this here, and you meet.
This thing edge doesn't go all the way through.
You meet
Okay.
here, and you thank you, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, Carrie, you got that right? They're looking for 2 lavs. They're looking for 2 more lavs for these presenters, so we could use 4 and 5. Carrie's on his way with those.
You guys come back up.
Right.
Okay. So when they're done.
We're back.
Wasn't that lovely? Thanks for coming to CHI 2022.
Again, it is you, the attendees, who make this a successful conference every year.
We want to once more thank our sponsors for this conference, to hero sponsor Google,
Champion sponsor Bloomberg,
champion sponsor Meta,
champion sponsor Microsoft,
champion sponsor the U.S. National Science Foundation,
champion sponsor Yahoo.
Thank you to our contributing sponsors, Adobe, Apple, and Autodesk.
And our contributing sponsors, Tableau and Toyota Research Institute.
And also thanks to our friends of CHI. Let's all take a moment to thank our sponsors again.
As always, thanks to ACM and to SIGCHI for their support of this conference.
All right, and so thanks to all of you, to our fellow organizers for their persistence, to our student volunteers for their dedication, to our authors, presenters, and attendees for their patience and grace.
And we are now very pleased to declare CHI 2022 closed and introduce the chair of the steering committee, Reagan Mandrake.
You're playing Reagan? You can't leave the stage.
We have
to stay here because she's going to thank you.
Oh.
Thank us.
And I'll stand here. We'll look for the camera. Can we see how the camera is going to work with this? So if I'm Regan and I'm talking and I'm saying, thank you so much for everything you've done, for all of your hard work, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Can we do a full camera shot on that so that we can see everybody here on the stage? Regan will be here in the 22 chairs. Yep. You don't want the 23 slide though. Okay.
It was such a nice slide. I love the logo.
Okay, can we just see the full one? Okay. If we can move it over a little. Okay, I'll be queued up. Okay, great. So then blah, blah, blah. Thank you so much for everything. So wonderful. And then she introduces the 23 chairs.
You got it? Yeah. Okay, perfect. Everybody else here does.
A little bit low because of her blouse, so just so you know, your volume. I'm low enough. How you doing? Good. Oh, you got it easy. Undershirt, belt, set. Checking, testing. All right. All right, thank you. Do they not need you that on there? Well, I had them up there because they were going to use it.
Welcome to the stage your CHI 2022 Technical Program Chairs, David Ayman Shama and Caroline Appert. Welcome to CHI 2022. The program will begin shortly. Please be seated. Our program will begin shortly.
Okay. Which mic do you want to use to check the screen? You want to do 7? Yeah, I wasn't even sending music to the stream. Can it possibly be speaking? It should be. Yes. Carrie, can you give Brian Mike 7 so he can test the screen?
You want to see the ASL interpreter real quick too? Stand by. Working on it. I'm on handheld 8. Check, check. Testing 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. Testing for the stream. Testing 1, 2, 3. Check, check. Audio check. Mic 7. Check, check for audio for stream. Testing 1, 2.
Are you good with that test? Yep, so. I do not have any mics open right now. Okay, then it's not, you're not taking the right feed if that's the case. There's no open mics that I'm aware of, except
Please be seated. Our program will begin shortly. Please be seated. Our program will begin shortly. Please welcome to the stage your CHI 2022 Technical Program Chairs, David Ayman Shama and Caroline Appert.
Hi, good morning, and thanks everyone for coming to CHI 2022, those here and those remote and afar.
It is you, the attendees, who make this a successful conference every year.
We're all incredibly proud of the program and all the committees and authors and you all who helped make this first hybrid CHI a success.
Now, we'd like to announce the award recognitions that were voted on during the conference.
For the student design competition winner, the award goes to Shimin Hu, Kiao Tiang, Ziwen Zheng, and Yufeng Zhao for Co-Orb Fostering Remote Workplace Gratitude with IoT Technology.
For the student game competition, we have two categories. In the category innovative interfaces, so the award goes to Ji-Hei Han, Adalberto Simeon for Persephone's Fit, a food-based approach to play in virtual reality. And in the category transformative and transgressive play, the award goes to Jun-Hyung Bae, Karan Aum, Aram Kwon, Seol-Hee Lee, Juhan Nam, Young-In Do for Yassi Trash Monster, an educational game for teaching machine learning to non-major students.
And in the student research competition undergraduate category, the winner is Knowledge Maps for Building Conceptual and Transferable CSS Knowledge by Roxana G. Wilcox and Fardim Munir. Oh. Wait. I got more to read. Sorry. But they're deserved. And then there's second and third place positions. Second place going to Cindy Hugh for self-disclosure for early relationship development through situated prompts and opportunistic collective experiences. And third, the emotional impact of multi-factor authentication for university students by David Arnold, Benjamin Blackman, Brenda Gibson, Anthony G. Monsivias, Garrett B. Powell, Megan Skeen, Michael Keelan Thompson, and Nathan B. Wade.
And more winners for the student research competition, but this time in the graduate category. So the winner is Irene Zanardi for Humi Sweet Home, a qualitative study on the small multisensory space Humi for inclusion of autistic kids in a primary school. And we have two runner-ups. So the second position is for Amanda Curtis for interactive research artifacts, interactive technologies as tools for knowledge creation. And the third position goes to Jacqueline Schmidt for climate resiliency through data, managing stormwater stewards in Detroit.
And on to interactivity. This is the jury's recognition award, and the winner goes to Quad Stretch, a forearm wearable multi-dimensional skin stretch display for immersive VR haptic feedback by Youngbo Aram Shim, Tai-Jun Kim, and Jin Hyuk Lee. And then we have a runner-up, two runner-ups. One is Unfinished Farewell by Jibao Li, Lao Bai Wu, Wei Ying Wu, Lu Wang, and Min Zhu, also demonstrating Noman, a flexible interface for noisy signal switch users by Nicholas Bonker, Emily Marie Neal, Keith Verntanen, and Tamara Broderick.
So for interactivity, the people also voted, and the winner is Demonstrating Electrical Head Actuation, Enabling Interactive Systems to Directly Manipulate Head Orientation by Yudai Tanaka, Jun Nishida, and Pedro Lopez. And we have two runner-ups. The first one is Biomaterial Playground, Engaging with Bio-Based Materiality by Fiona Bell, Neta Hofer, Hyeline Choi, Ella McQuaid, Ethan Fryer, and Mirella Alissar. And another one, to Demonstrating Infrared Tags, Decoding Invisible 3D Printed Tags with Convolutional Neural Networks by Mustafa Dogan, Virapatra Yota Morsensorn, Hamad Taka, Yuni Zhu, Akar Gupta, and Stephanie Mueller. And now, please welcome to the stage our general chairs.
But that's right, all the way live. Jack the funky music. I like it. Straight all the way live. Jack the funky music. Hey, yeah. I want it.
All right, thanks, Ivan and Caroline. Someday soon you'll be able to get some rest. So this week we've seen a lot of grace.
People have been happy to see each other, have been patient with tech failures, and have greeted old and new friends with open arms.
We appreciate the session chairs, AV staff, and support staff who helped work through all of these problems.
All week, we've been especially touched by graduate students who have been invigorated by this CHI.
Just give yourself a round of applause for making it through a tough week, new hybrid conference, new situation, so we made it, everybody. Congratulations. I also really want to recognize those people and thanks everybody who attended online. We were all figuring out what hybrid means. We're an iterative design organization and field, so we should know that we will be iterative about this. We stumbled many times this week, but speakers always got up and kept going. We appreciate you.
And special thanks to our SVs, whom we've seen working very hard over the week, both online and here. They've been essential in keeping this complex operation running as smoothly as possible, and always with a smile, even under stressful circumstances. A smile which I hope you saw through the mask.
We pause for a moment to remember Ed Lang, who passed recently. In his honor, we also want to remember and pay recognition to all of the losses all of us has faced over the past 2.5 years. It's been a tough time for many people. Many of us have lost opportunities, we've lost health, we've lost our emotional stability, we've lost the ability to interact in some cases, and in often cases we've lost loved ones or had loved ones be still. But at the same time, loved ones have gotten us through this pandemic, right? So I want to just take 10 seconds to think about a loved one who helped you get through the pandemic. Thank you. So it's our pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for CHI 2022, Dr. Payal Arora.
Dr. Aurora is professor and chair in technology, values, and global media cultures at Erasmus University Rotterdam. Her work focuses on digital usage in the global south, including digital cultures, inequality, and governance.
Dr. Aurora is the author of several books, including The Next Billion Users, Digital Life Beyond the West, and Leisure Commons.
So during the talk, you can submit questions to the Slido form in Hub. So Cliff and I will go through the questions after the talk. So join us now in welcoming Dr. Aurora.
All right. Hi, everyone. Can I just say it's an absolute honor to be here. And for you, I've worn my non-Zoom outfit. I mean, heels and all right? So thank you to everyone who's made this event happen. And thank you to all of you for still being here. So I know it's the last day, so it's phenomenal to see this big in-person crowd. All right, so let's get started. But, you know, I've been following the conversations online as I've made my way from Amsterdam to here. And I've been really inspired by the kind of reflective conversations you've been having. And so I've kind of pivoted my talk a bit, to that of inclusive design and the next billion. So, bear with me on that. But before I get started in the meat and potatoes of it, I want to do some sort of crowd sensing. So I want you guys to make noise based on the questions I ask, yeah? So one of the questions is, how many here do work on the global south? Make some noise. Okay. And how many here would call themselves a UX researcher? Okay, all right. Now here's two questions which are not quite fitting, but it will fit down. Is how many of you have actually made a serious career change to be here? Wow, okay, nice. And last but not least, How many of you feel like an imposter right now? All right. So I'm a committed imposter. I used to be an art dealer in New York and San Francisco before moving to academia. So, and that being said, on top of it, in my university, I'm in 3 different faculties. I'm in philosophy, I'm in media studies, and I'm in business school. And can I just tell you, they don't like each other. So I navigate these worlds, and I've also co-founded an organization called FemLab, and I'll tell you more about that later. So, you know, at this point, I'm proudly homeless academically and otherwise, right? But what really does root me, and that's my point of passion, is I'm a digital anthropologist. I've been doing this for more than 2 decades. I've been looking at like people in low-income communities, how do they use and make sense of digital media in their everyday lives. And, you know, this has started, I'm from India, so it's been going on for 2 decades and continues with my organization. But also in Brazil many years ago, and it still continues. We're doing some projects right now. And more recently in Namibia and Nigeria. Now, all this culminated to the book, The Next Billion Users, which got released 2 years ago. And, you know, it was really good timing for me because, well, one is search engine optimization, because at the same time of my book release, every tech company was either, you know, investing heavily in their Next Billion User Group labs or were beginning one. I was there at the beginning of, I inaugurated Spotify's Next Billion User Lab in Europe. Intel approached me on their Next Billion User Lab. I mean, every tech suspect, right? Google, you know, grew their lab from, you know, and we were on a podcast together, promoting their lab from, you know, something like 30 to hundreds of people in just a year. So, but that being said, it's not just the tech groups that are approaching. It's the other, you know, companies and organizations from very different sectors. So I've been approached by venture capital firms, and there's this whole wave of conscientious investing, and they want guidance on that. And then you have diamond industries. Yes, so I've been approached by diamond industries, global seed companies, you know, pharma companies looking to invest and bring universal digital and use AI to sort of universalize healthcare for all in, you know, places in Africa. So what I'm getting at is clearly something's going on. Data is a new oil, and while in academia we've kind of completely critiqued and broken this, you know, framing down for good reason as a sort of very extractive, reductionistic, you know, approach to, you know, taking our rich communicative practices and making it mainly a commodity, you know, in a very capitalistic way. That being said, that kind of sort of anger and rhetoric doesn't quite seep into the industry. They use this as a source of inspiration, actually. You know, AI as a rocket and, you know, data as a fuel. And in the AI arms race, how do they compete to get the data of the next billion user groups, right? After all, we know data is, you know, infinite supposedly, but the attention is not. So it's a vicious competition, and now the next billion user group is very prized. And that's because in the last few years, a lot has happened which has been game-changing. Like, for example, a few years ago, Jio, Indian, you know, organization, telecom organization, funded by the multi-billionaire Ambani of Reliance Industries, made data some of the cheapest in the world, which has allowed millions of people to get online for the first time, right? So the fact is, the global south is a radical normative. There's no question about it. Just look at the stats, right? US accounts for fewer than 1 in 15 of the world's internet users, right? So that's only 6.4%. The US is the margins, okay? Internet users across the world's highly developed economies account for less than 1/3 of the total's connected population. And the next web is going to be shaped by the global south users in ways which we cannot even fathom. And we will not be able to fathom as long as we don't look, right, at them in a serious and a legitimate manner. So just China and India alone already make the majority of the users. And that's just a fraction of their population. That's like, what, 30, 40%? So there's a huge market optimization. No wonder these companies are excited, right? And then it's not just the scale, it's the intensity. The average Chinese user spends twice the amount of time online than the average American user. And then there's a nature of content. I've been working with KPMG on, they have this annual digital report, and this was in 2020, and one of the key findings was the consumption of the audiovisual content was the highest amongst the lowest socioeconomic group. There's power in numbers, right? India is a preferred digital innovation hub. I'm currently working with a number of tech companies to rethink their business models. I can't mention which ones because of, usual paperwork. But what's interesting is everybody is telling me, I'd like to do India first, because if we can make it in India, we can make it elsewhere. The reason being that India has an extraordinarily rich socio-cultural diversity and linguistic diversity, which is really, really important, with scores of official languages and thousands of dialects. India is a hotbed. I mean, think ShareChat, for example, hotbed for how do I design which can, in ways which can reach many different communities in their own languages, resonate with their own aesthetics, their own kind of, ways in which they're expressing themselves, so I can capture these markets. And how do I remain agile? How do I remain flexible? How do I respond and grow with the user so I don't lose them on the way, because it's a vicious competition, right? So, and not to forget, Silicon Valley's sort of, marketing Bible, is Digital 2021 report by VR Social and Hootsuite, cemented all this, right? What do they say? They said it very boldly and in a very lucid case, and I suggest you all read it if you are, motivated on this, and just to get a real glimpse into the mindset of where Silicon Valley is also at. They literally say the next big trend in digital won't emerge from the Western market. So we need to think outside the West. Now, based on my experiences, I've been thinking about, how do I aggregate some of these conversations? I've had, since the book came out, I've had like hundreds of conversations with so many different industries. Some of it was beyond my comfort, obviously. I mean, I'm a digital anthropologist. Sure, I can wing it, I mean, I'm from India. We make do. So, but there's a point when I'm talking to diamond industry experts and I'm trying to nod and be passionate about I don't know what, right? But the fact remains is I think I have got some interesting patterns I've recognized across these, few years. The industry has made a lot of strides. While academia still sort of, is very siloed in its knowledge making, industry has gone way ahead. There's a huge disjuncture always, right, between academia and industry, and it's becoming wider because we're still committed to our own disciplinary silos, our own conference little workshops, which are where, sociologists talk to sociologists, anthropologists talk to anthropologists, area studies, etc. But that being said, the prototype user in the industry is still white, male, middle-class, Anglo-Saxon, and there needs to be a lot of effort and work done to shift that, right? Gaze. Now, organizationally, I've actually been pretty astounded. So I've been, I'm not talking about like the demon child of tech, like Facebook, for example, or whatnot. I'm talking about well-meaning, the better tech companies. Even they are organized in ways which are kind of surprising. For example, I'm currently engaged with a few companies where they have internally a group for inclusive design, and now it's called equity products. There's another for international design team, cloud computing, marketing, and education. And they don't talk to each other, right? So I'll end up giving talks to each division because they don't actually internally talk within the company. And this is not all. So even though India is the center focus, their relationship with branches in a multinational company of, those out there, which is offices in Brazil, in China, and basically in Africa, are more top-down. So teams in India are staying up to interview users in the US, right? I mean, how ridiculous is that? It's not in sync even with all this stuff I've been telling you about. So that's just the organizational structure. And then, let's face it, the next billion users is a marketing gimmick. It is a way to rebrand populations that are always considered high risk because they're too exotic, too unpalatable. They're just too out there from the sort of Western construct and imagination. And this has its legacy. I mean, in the 1990s, if you remember, the business guru Prahalad came up with a book called Bottom of the Pyramid. And it was a New York Times bestseller, and it remained there for a couple of weeks. And for those who are not familiar with that, what he was trying to tell the companies is that, hey, it could be a win-win. We need to see the Global South as legitimate customers, and we need to pivot towards them, but we need to also rethink the way in which we do things. So this was considered inclusive capitalism, and it's also come under critique, but the idea is it got the ball rolling, right? And even before that, Wall Street realized that nobody wants to invest in developing countries, so let's call it, emerging markets, like it's moving in a direction, and then make it even more palatable, call them BRICS, like the tigers, so like the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, just put in South Africa, and so make it much more accessible. So, I mean, this sort of branding exercises, the fact that we need that right now, there's a problem, right? I mean, do we need to still market the idea that we need to look at the majority of the world? Can't it just be sufficient in itself, right? And the last point is about tech to sort of cross-cultural and cross-sector logic. As I said that, I've been working with solar panel companies and pharma businesses in Africa. And I noticed that they are creating unusual partnerships for resiliency because you see MOUs between governments, say in Kenya to Rwanda, can fall through based on political issues. So there's a lot of pan-African approaches, just like pan-Latin America, pan-Asia, because they have to do it in terms of economy of scales, but also collaborate with media companies, construction companies. So you are going to see a motley group, and your career-shifting people here will be the assets of the future, because you have to understand that industries, think about Tesla and the auto industry in Germany. I mean, did Germany expect to be facing competition from a database company? Not really. And we are seeing this again and again, that what was once competition is not, and now companies that you don't think are competition are, right? And you have to be on your toes. You have to become Renaissance-like, right? Aid agencies. So in my book, I've heavily criticized them. I found them very archaic. I mean, they've constantly pushed like the sort of post-World War agenda of, users as instrumental beings. So you design farmer apps for farmers. Women will check about healthcare information for their children. It's like completely sort of two-dimensional users in the Global South. Children will be very seeking for education. Why would they ever play games? Of course not, right? I mean, they're different kind of children in the Global South, which obviously not true. The point is, I've been criticizing them quite a bit, and for good reason. I mean, if you look at the way development agencies are fostering technologies and designing apps, they're designed for failure. There's a graveyard of apps out there, right? For every gig of 2 to 3 years, it kind of culminates in an app and it just gets left there in the name of innovation. In fact, there's a running joke amongst development experts on this field is facing, suffering from pilotitis, pilots that are not built to scale, right? And this matters. I've actually made the case for less innovation because innovation has become a proxy for the sort of solutionism and, and that's not healthy because what they're doing is they're using the global south as a laboratory to test their products, and then they're like, we're done. We've used it as a marketing test, and it's not meant to be integrated into the society. I mean, so in the last year and a half, I've been working with the many refugee agencies, in Europe, and including UNHCR. And one thing is certain is that connectivity is not a right, it's a privilege. They're all trying to pioneer business models of sustainability for the millions of refugees out there. And for all of you, for those out here in this audience and online who are doing work on migrants and, and mobility, that is a significant portion of the world's population, and it's going to grow, unfortunately, exponentially. Look at the Ukrainian war, right? So that is something that is moving and scaling, and yet we are looking at them as a sort of, in a very old school concept, right, of users in a very instrumental way. And of course, if you look at the changing nature, like I just gave a keynote for NetHope, which is one of those places where I've seen the demographics change. 2/3 are pure industry. The development industry has been sort of taken over by tech philanthropy, right? So now it's really an extension of the tech world. That being said, I have to say that there's been a lot of improvement. For example, UNDP is doing some really interesting work now, particularly in the innovation area, and really reflexive, I have to admit. And then UNHCR approached me last year saying that they would design their whole annual work plan based on my book. And we worked together and we built a team and we really tried to change things. And that was also exciting that they, in spite of me criticizing them to death, they actually were kind of open and they had a very reflexive conversation. And in 2 weeks, I'm going to be at Paris for the UNESCO launch of the EdTech Summit, where they're celebrating their investment on EdTech thought, research, and practice for the last 2 decades. And the report is genuinely a very reflective report. It's literally called the EdTech tragedy, about all the sort of, venture capital funding, this insanity of the EdTech world, and what's going on in the idea it can actually replace a school. And I really appreciate it, and it reminds you why these agencies are around. And the last but not least is governance, right? So at a time where we need global solidarity, and we witnessed, right, the asset of globalization in terms of the vaccination innovations, we are also seeing deep inward-lookingness, right? In the Netherlands, when I'm going through in Amsterdam, which is a very open-minded place, there was a huge move for be local, go local, right? The idea is, why don't we become self-sustaining, self-sufficient? And I understand that. The sentiment of let's cut the world out there and let's protect ourselves, right? And this is something we are going to be all facing, is like, who are we designing for? Right? So you see a very different kind of internet space happening. You see it deeply fragmented. You have data localization because a different kind of era we're living in. Digital sovereignty is taking a new form. Countries like India, China, and elsewhere are saying, what, we're tired of having tech companies dictate what policies and what practices should be in our country. So we've seen the rise of censorship, we've seen the rise of blocking of websites, of basically cutting it all down in the name of national sovereignty. Data localization is rising like crazy as a mandate. So, there's that as a sort of a climate we are entering into. But there's also an interesting dimension is the GDPR in Europe has pushed and absorbed even the climate crisis in a way which is actually positive. And the truth is that Europe is at the forefront of regulation, and then it does tend to get cut and pasted the rest of the world. So it's important to look at what's happening at the EU level, right? And Green Deal, for example, has now, this is the new policy, saying, which is a GDPR++, is that you need to, as a tech company, justify why you're collecting data. There is no such thing as indiscriminate data collection for what if. So now, as part of your business model, there needs to be justification, which is commendable, right? Although a challenge, as I can imagine also. Anyway, so as of now, in about a few weeks ago, I've actually accepted the position of an advisor between Prosus, one of the biggest tech venture capital companies in the world, and the Indian government, where I'll be serving as a liaison between the two to build the digital economy in India. And, this is a murky ground. And usually academics would completely deplatform me or something, because the truth is, when you're dealing in these sort of political spaces of, tension, it is dangerous. But the way I look at it, it's our duty to participate, because if it's not us, then who will, right? We really need to engage and push in the voices, otherwise things are not going to happen as much. But the fact is, there is this sort of us and them sort of divide, right? I mean, in terms of knowledge making, as I've already said, like, look at academia. We have area studies, Global South, South Asia, African studies, whatnot, right? So there's the area-specific studies. The American is default. Why even bother saying in the US? Some of you have already had that discussion. And so knowledge making is still on that end. I sit on a number of panels and committees in the US for PhD students. And I have to say, in the last few years, almost all of them have come and told me that then when they're looking for a job in the US, for a tenure-track job or, postdoc, this is a kind of question they get asked at the interviews almost all the time, which is, how is your work going to be of interest to an American student, right? Which already has so many problems. Firstly, it's not why the assumption of the American interests, students' interests, and it's your job to shape knowledge in a way which is reflexive and reflective of the genuine diversity of knowledge out there. So, that's already the way in which we're sort of reproducing the sort of siloed thinking. In terms of policy making, the us and them is also the double standard still pervades. If you look at the Green Deal, and I've actually been talking, and I'll be, at an event with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Netherlands in a few weeks, and they have been, I've actually criticized them openly for putting EU values across the document. They keep mentioning EU values. I mean, what the hell is that? Is it different from, universal values? And then shall we go down that path of, in values and design in terms of nationalistic values? Shall we do Indian values, Chinese values, Russian values? Is that a good way to go in terms of values and design? Should we do ethnic values? Where do we go? This is opening a can of worms. And then industry, the double standards in practice, right? In spite of the fact that Global South countries make up the top countries with the most number of users besides the US and the UK, in practice, what did Facebook do? They basically, when they decided to save instances about WhatsApp, where they decided to share the metadata with that of WhatsApp with Facebook, there was a huge uproar, and immediately Meta said, "Don't worry, EU citizens are protected under GDPR," but India was fine, and that actually, really pissed them off, right? Obviously. So, and you can't get away with it now, right? I mean, as I've said, it's a different era. We're not in post-World War II. Countries have become their own, right? So I'd like to go through 3 myths about inclusive design that if we can just dismantle once and for all, it would really get into the right direction. Is the pyramid of needs. Maslow, the guy's been dead for so many decades. Why the hell? Why? Why do I hear it as if it's the still go-to theory? I mean, some part of you must wonder, what's the point of academic critique and everybody has resolved in saying there's nothing new to critique about, but then what? Why does it still stick? What's the stickiness? And for those who don't know this theory, it's like this notion that if you're, the poor, you have to go through a process of satisfying your physiological needs, safety, social esteem, and then self-actualization. self-actualization. We have vast evidence, even amongst this entire community, that low-income populations or vulnerable communities are actually most driven by self-actualization, their need for respect, dignity, freedom, and they will do the most irrational, whether it means protest and put themselves at harm's way, because it makes sense to them. The irrational is rational, right? So the next one users, the Global South users are not instrumental beings, they're aspirational users. Here, on the left is whatever. In the green is Neil Renaud, right? And he's a village influencer. He has more followers on Instagram than some of the top fashion brands, okay? And he plays with the material and the context at hand, and he's self-actualizing in ways which are really interesting, right? This is, the image on the other side is basically from my fieldwork about the romance economy. If you want to understand privacy, digital privacy, and you want to understand the appetite for risk, you need to understand that much of the next billion users are teenagers with teen desires. They are living in patriarchal societies where 98% possibly will have arranged marriages. There's no love marriage, but they're fed on this whole Bollywood trope of like birds coming to it and like romance, going crazy, right? Soap operas, etc. And so there's this deep aspiration to have experiences. And many here in the Global South community have already done rich work on the sort of romance economies and how they are taking to different technologies so they can be in touch with and they can have a love experience, right? Even if they never meet the person ever in their life. And also, that also pivots our attention to the fact that there's deep harms that can also happen, because it's also this need, this deep desire is also a great commodity for a lot of predator apps, right? Like L'Amour, which is totally designed for that. Because guess what? Between India and China alone, there's 60 to 80 million girls missing because of gender bias. So you have an extraordinary number of lonely men who will never have a relationship in their life, never be able to afford a marriage. So they are going to these apps, and that is an amazing material for them, right? So the second is privacy as a core value, which is a myth, because there's so much research done on privacy as an essential need, and obviously it is an important, value. But privacy by design field has exploded in recent years for good reason, right? But the fact is, I've been calling for the decolonizing of privacy studies because we have to understand that privacy is a luxury. Majority of people don't even have privacy in their everyday lives as much. In a typical way they live, a typical family will have 3 generations living in 1-bedroom home where they barely have any physical privacy. They step out, their communities know where they're going. They're not afraid of surveillance capitalism or authoritarianism, as much. I mean, yes, they are living in these contexts, but they're the most worried about interpersonal surveillance. Their mothers and fathers and brothers constantly tracking them, seeing where they're moving, their community members. It's very upfront because they're in very conservative societies, they're in patriarchal societies, in very strict societies. And then there's a gender angle, which is being amplified. Extraordinarily disturbing reports that women are actually declining in their use. Like they are actually, since 2018, they have decided to opt out, not just of an app, of the internet. That's something, like I've actually been approached by some of the top tech companies telling me this is their main concern. They are really worried because they feel that the women think the internet is not for them. That's some real craziness. And that's a whole host of a conversation. But for them, privacy is a luxury, and in fact, probably will not be able to be a real thing because they have a mobile phone which is shared with their family, their brothers, their husbands. They have to accept that they're going to be tracked. In fact, husbands openly say, when you get married, I'm going to be tracking your movements. And they put it on, they give them as a phone as a gift. They have to have no passwords. They have to get permission from their husbands to set up a WhatsApp account. And this is the life. So we need to look at visibility just as much as privacy, right? And then the last of the myths is trickle-down tech catch-up philosophy, was the idea that Silicon Valley innovates there and disseminates to the rest. And we even have the evidence with mobile telephony, even like the prosthetic foot, right, which was innovated in India, the cheapest in the world. Arvind Eye Clinic for cataract operations, the cheapest in the world, again in India, right? So much innovation has happened across the global south, but doesn't get captured, doesn't get valorized, doesn't get amplified, so you don't think they're innovators. In fact, Carly Fiorina, didn't she say that, oh, Chinese are imitator nations? Where's she now, right? I mean, Chinese are like, yeah. That was a very visionary thing for you to say. So, yeah, I guess you didn't luck out on the investment part. So anyway, but the point is that we really need to rethink this, right, about this trickle-down philosophy, about that they are co-creators and partners and even leaders of innovation. So, I'm doing my own little bit of academic activism by co-founding this lab, and I will talk about later. And when I mean academic activism, and I see that we all don't have a choice. It is our duty to be activists, not in terms of imposing our ideology and forcing it upon the data. I'm not saying that. I'm saying more in terms of genuinely seeking for real representation of the society we live in, which means making sure the voices come out, making sure people's ideas are heard, from the diversity of teams to the rethinking how disciplines intersect with each other, to valorizing work from elsewhere. And elsewhere is not elsewhere. Let's stop othering it, right? And so we set up this group called FemLab, which is an initiative, which is a feminist future work initiative, seed funded by IDRC, and we have partners from across public and private industry. The co-founder, Usha Ramans from University of Hyderabad, and she's actually the vice president of IMCR. But, I have to say, we have this amazing team in Germany, in Netherlands, India, the US, and, many of them are young entrepreneurial women who are also, we also have Adobe, members from Adobe here, the private sector, UNHCR, anyway. And what's great is that we are trying to do something, which is, we are a loose collective where we all have our institutional affiliations, but we're committed to paying it forward by supporting each other in academia, in industry, and sort of making our presence heard and felt, and making sure we can make impact on industry and policy. The way in which we're doing this is that we're putting low-income women workers at the center. The way we see that, and why that? Because they are some of the most vulnerable segments of society in the global south, by far. If you look at the lowest economic domain, it is oftentimes women, and then you intersect it with their caste, religion, etc., and they're even more vulnerable. And also, they have been dropping in the work, like in India, they experience women dropping out of the workforce, and this is happening post-pandemic across the world, right, where women have taken on care responsibilities. So also inspired, so you have a double sort of, impact of them being excluded in the digital space and from the physical space, and that is really compounding the divide, right? So we put them at the center. We are doing deep ethnography work, and we are looking into the context. We're working in a stakeholder approach, very localized, but also seeing resonance with policymaking at a national or a regional level, and even international. The second, we're working with Justice Adda, a wonderful organization which is legal scholars and designers have come together in Delhi, and actually the founder is in Tilburg, in the Netherlands. And and what we're doing is the idea that yes, it's good to do all this and to be engaged with policy making, but what good is it if the workers don't understand their rights? And this comes at a good time as we see the rise of unionizing across board because of the perversity that we have trillionaires at the same time where people are in warehouses are barely able to even cover their basic livelihoods. And then the third is we are, giving consultancies in terms of design and how do you intervene through not dramatic interventions, but meaningful intersections. So I have a few minutes. I just want to give you snapshots of the kinds of work we're doing. Working with female, CEOs of cab driving, because there's a huge scarcity of female drivers, but there's a massive demand, and there's so much of femtech money coming in, but there's no takers, because it's still a big stigma for women to roam around and claim public space. And many of you who are doing this work know this very well. There's a long history, or legacy of the public space is not for women, right? And they have to be very cautious about it. But that has implications on the labor force here. And so there's this rise of gender-segregated apps for women, by women, and a number of the CEOs in India are saying, you know what, we don't want to even appify, because what's the point? We actually have contracts, and that way we are able, because we don't want to fail, because Ola did that, and they appified and took all this venture capital money, but what happened was they couldn't succeed because they didn't have female drivers. Cultural change takes time, unfortunately. But, things like training, you have to train women for four to 6 months because they don't have confidence in dealing with strangers because they've been socialized not to talk to strangers, right? But here's an interesting insight. Is automation is agency sometimes, because you see all the sort of algorithms of oppression, and you focus on the sort of automation as sort of dehumanizing, but actually in these contexts it humanizes, because here's a good example. So one of the female fleet owners says that this is a typical customer who, when they're requesting through a manual, manual booking, they say, I don't want a girl with a Muslim name. What is her surname? What is the caste? She's too short, she's too tall, she's too thin, she's dark. She doesn't look cool, all of that. These are things that are happening when not commercial cabs, but private placement bookings, right? So it's not about your driving skill. It's about how women should be, and that's one of the obstacles. And so they are looking at automation and anonymity as a sort of a strength, because it nudges people to not ask these questions, as if it's not an option. It's by default anonymous, right? Plural identities. India experienced one of the biggest, internal migrations, because of the pandemic and the dramatic shutdown. And, it was akin to the divide between India and Pakistan, as people were saying, in terms of the visibility of internal migrancy. And so, because we focus so much on between countries, right? But we forget that much of our economy is being upheld by these workers. And one of the things we were dealing with in the sector, so we look at 6 different sectors in FemLab, and we're growing: ride-hailing, construction, artisanal, and a variety of other sectors, salon services. In this case, we were dealing with construction companies. And they said that, well, our construction workers, 94% did not get the bailout money, even though the government was giving it to them, because they were not registrable, because they have multiple identities that doesn't fit. The fact is they have plural identities because they're farmers, because farming is seasonal, and they're also construction workers, but they also need to supplement their income with another kind of job. So they don't fit, and so they're not able to access and benefit from all this fintech innovation in the last 2 years in India. So something as simple as that, right? Interoperability is not about just between different high-tech platforms. It's also fax machines. It's also like low-tech in many ways, the manual forms, And so this is a point to reckon with. And the last example is about care-based nudges. Urban Company, for example, there's been a lot of protests against them, and they're a salon service company, and so they've been, trying to change, and they've shifted from the sort of transactional to community-oriented. And they've started to do these nudges of, indicating to customers, have you offered your, the service provider, the professional at home who's come to do your nails or your massage, a glass of water, or allow them to use a toilet. This is because you're countering a culture of servitude that can be very much an obstacle in these areas. So just to conclude here, let's stop bracketing the global south, right? It is not something exotic. It's permeating across sectors, across industries. It is very much, if you are here today, you're part of a global value chain, and we need to humanize every aspect of that global value chain, right? We need to, they say think global, act local. No, we need to also act local responsibly because we are intrinsically interlinked. When we act local, we are actually basically erasing much of what's happening out there, right? Pessimism, bias is a privilege. I hear, oh my God, the tech is oppressing us, and the people who even say, oh, we need to get out of the internet. That's that pessimism is nowhere reflective of when you go in the global south, they look at it as, hope. Digital media is hope to them because it's always in relation to something else. And in this case, it's in relation to the existing socioeconomic realities, right? So we need to sensitize because pessimism doesn't give you fuel for change. It's always optimism, right? And reflexive universality. Universality has got a bad name, but we really should still aim for it because there's much solidarity between marginalized groups everywhere. And if we can design for them, we're designing for all, right? So let's reclaim a bit of our romance in universality in a genuine sense. Qualitative as an anecdote has been told to me again and again, saying, but isn't that an anecdote? And I want to reverse it and say, yeah, sure, because anecdotes can be very powerful. We need a whole host, an army of stories to really change people's minds. And, dry statistics often doesn't. And, the fact is that it has changed in a sense, that people are taking it seriously. And last 2 points is cross-sectoral by default. As I said, sectors are intersecting. And if you want to be ahead of the game, you need to think about, think about super apps and the hyper apps. There's you have fintech, romance, gaming. You have all of it in one. You have fintech emerging from the most unlikely sources. You have metaverse with the whole gaming communities taking a lead in the way in which we finance, we bank, with the way in which we educate, right? So we have to move out of the siloed approach. And last but not least, and I hope we can form a little community of our imposter syndrome because, embrace it as something you should be proud of because what really works is to be on the outside because you don't get so navel-gazing as people, as cultures. So by being on the outside, you can actually also move. And homelessness in that respect means that you can create your home anywhere and everywhere, and you have agency in that. And with that, hope we can form a club. So thank you.
Wow, thank you for an amazing keynote. We have some questions from the Slido, and I'm going to just pick the one that was asked quite nicely. This one comes from Jasmine Jones, and they ask, are there opportunities, or are there other incentives for designing for the next billion beyond chasing the new market or justifying inclusion on the basis of corporate economic benefit?
Yeah, it should just be an end in itself, isn't it? Because when we have, we keep talking about data gluts, but we have a massive data deficit on many communities when we say, oh, there's not much research done on these ends. That should be an end in itself, but people need more because how is it going to reframe our ways of thinking? So it has to go beyond the corporate. But also it's in terms of the communities that are facing. So we have multiple crises, right? The climate crisis, the crisis on peace, right? Which we've taken for granted for so long, and now with the Ukraine war, there's a genuine possibility of World War III, right? And I'm not even being alarmist here, right? And then you have growing inequality where it is so massive. And so with all this, we really have to think beyond the corporate because actually doing social good is also weirdly to the corporate benefit, because surely this is not sustainable, right? So yeah, I absolutely think so.
Okay, so we have a question from Gabriel Barbosa. So how can we better support designers and researchers from the Global South to build these solutions instead of depending on researchers from developed countries?
Yeah, so, you know, it's, I was on a podcast with one of the, this was with the head of the international team at Adobe, and he asked me, he's like, do we have a right to even go to the Global South, and is it our place? And I'm like, you're already there. Like, what do you mean? Like, you're there, you're very much going to be there. There's no, you know, it's not, that's not the question you should be asking. You should be asking, what kind of partnerships can I build where I can give legitimate voice and standing to you know, people and researchers in the Global South, actors out there, because obviously they have something that, you know, people out here, even myself, by the way, I don't, if I'm living in the Netherlands, I am, of course, you know, removed from the context. So they have the, you know, the unique perspective of living a particular context, and all that can't be captured. Right? Like in basically you can transcribe interviews, etc., but that doesn't capture the complexities of living there. So ideas will, you know, emerge which are fresh and very applicable, and we need to listen to that, right? So I think but also it's understanding each group has their own strengths. So it's not an either or. So we need to move away from the sort of binary. Should we do this or that? It's more like, how can we all do our best in this, you know, approach to resolving some of the biggest challenges of our time? And we need everyone on board. And with each one recognizing everyone's strengths. So if we can do that, we don't have to pit one or the other, because that's also a very sort of, you know, neo-colonial thinking, isn't it? It's like there can only be one who succeeds, and then it, of course, pits people against each other, you know, and it makes it into a sort of a race to the bottom. And let's break out of that, right? So.
Our next question comes from Alex Levitt, and this is, how do you propose addressing the complexities of authoritarian states and developing democracies when trying to build a safe, inclusive, participatory system might be challenging?
Yeah, so if I'm getting the question right, is how do you design within the fact, like say authoritarian regimes, you know, it is possibly one of the biggest challenges, because when you go and, you know, well, I mean, what do you do? What are your options as designers? Do you say, I'm not going to work there in an authoritarian regime? But guess what? Less than 5% of the world's countries are liberal democracies. The rest of it spans a spectrum of from paternalistic authoritarianism to downright just, you know, violent authoritarianism, right? So you're basically saying, I don't engage with the world. So you can't have that mentality. So what I think is hopeful to, you know, think in these terms is that including cooperations are made of people. You know, including, say, you know, across board, right? You have these oligarchs, tech oligarchs, but they're still made of people, and people are changing these organizations when they refuse to work on certain apps. They refuse to be complicit in certain efforts, or they are proactive on others, right? That allows these organizations to change from inside out. And the same thing with governments. Governments are not, you know, inherently all evil. I've met some extraordinarily thoughtful, brilliant people. For example, in India, we just had a symposium 2 weeks ago where we had the Ministry of Rural Development on board, and he's a smart, young guy, very thoughtful, really an advocate for decentralization. And anyway, but the point is, and very open to having discussions. And you're going to find a lot of that. You need to tap into those people, partner them, you know, be discreet, make it, you know, don't make it everything some big statement of moral outrage or whatnot. You know, target, you know, specific areas, because that's how we're going about creating social change in India and elsewhere is we focus on, a particular problem within a particular context, try to resolve it, and then also give credit and bring and rope people in so they can take credit, but also boost it and scale it, right? Because that's what we want. And then change happens in that way. We've got to move from this Hollywood, let's burn the place down, for us to have change. It's not going to work that way.
So our next question is from Cliff Lampy. So can we change equity in technology without addressing broader forms of power, economic, military, political, and so on?
Well, that's the easy one, no. Obviously not. No, of course we have to think, what I like about what's happened, there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic, right? And one of it being is how our everyday vocabulary has changed to now we think about intersectionality as something like given, like we are talking about it amongst us as if, of course, we're asking those. And there's a shift in academia in that way, or that, even in practice out there. So people are, Me Too movement has made people much more conscious. So these sort of like global shifts, these changes create a sort of new sort of bottom line or benchmark of what people consider as a norm, a normative thinking, and that's good. That's progress for us, right? So of course, and the only way we can do it is by looking at it as how things are so interconnected with each other, how we are interconnected as people, how places are interconnected in ways, and we have to be careful. Like look at the French, right, and the election. If you ignore and you think Paris is the center, you're going to face some serious issues, right? So thinking just because something is not in proximity or not visible doesn't mean it doesn't have power. And clearly we've seen how the so-called invisible has been able to exercise their power and become visible. But do we really want to wait for that to happen every single time? Do we want protests and mass protests across the world? Or are we waiting for that? Or can we actually preemptively say, look, we see these are trends, so we need to think about it holistically and understand that complexity is the inherent nature of our interactions, our relationships, and the way in which we have to live for us to really, come up with viable solutions for the climate crisis, for world peace, for, inequality. And that's the only way we can go about it anyway.
So this question comes from Christina Hoek. In the spirit of avoiding the us versus them divide, why are there only women in your Femtech initiative?
Why are there only women? No, there are some men, but you're right. I like working with women. So, but it's not deliberate. It just happened that we, especially in the Indian context, we found a lot of them were very proactive. They wanted to belong, and we are, like I said, we are part of a loose collective, and it's small little things like, that recommendation letters. Usha and I have been training them on how to. So one of the things in the last 2 years, a lot of these young women came up to us, very proactively leaned in, whatever. I hate to say that, but anyway, they reached out, did some sort of cold calling, pushed their way, proved themselves, and now many of them are doing phenomenally well. They, some of them have gotten to. One has gone to University of Toronto for a PhD. The other's got a assistant professorship at IIM, and a Fulbright scholar and all. And the way in which Usha and I have been working with all of them is we want to boost them because it's really tough in India, in the patriarchal structures at hand. You see the idea of manners as the norm. There's no discussions of, have women. Like, even on the advisory committee that I'm a part of, I think I'm going to be a sort of one of the few women, So it's just a norm. So the way in which I like to balance it is by putting my weight on that end of it. And because I know that there's other work being done. Not to say that I'm We're not going to take on. In fact, the founder of Justice Adda, the one who's our partner for the legal storytelling, is male. Does that help? So yeah, but yeah, it's a good question.
Thanks. I like how you were mentioning it's about balancing and not excluding. So.
Yeah, it's really important to do that because, you know, it's been really crippling for a lot of women in India, particularly because of the COVID. They have taken up care work, parent care work. We noticed in our team, almost all of them are the ones who moved back home to take care of their parents. And they were doing that, they were doing our work, they were doing the institutional work. It was kind of crazy. Like the average time, they're sleeping 4 hours, it's not sustainable. Like they were doing one is doing a PhD with me and has a full-time job and works for Times of India. I'm like, it's going to be a burnout situation. And this is not just exceptional for youth out there. It's for across board, including in this room, I'm sure. There's a burnout scenario because of the ridiculous expectations we have of each other. And where are we heading? Like, you can write 20 papers, who's reading them, right? So, like this notion of like this quantitative, like, come on, let's just admit it. I mean, we're going to, you know, you're not even going to read each other's papers as much. So, I mean, why can't we produce quality work? Why can't we break out of these damn rubrics, you know? So, yeah.
So we have a question from Sri. So you mentioned India so many times when referring to Global South. In your opinion, do you think all countries from the Global South share the same myth and problems?
And that's a really good question. And indeed, it was India-centric, but like I said, I've been doing a lot of work in Brazil. In fact, I've done work comparing Brazil and India in many regards. And clearly, they're quite different, radically different in terms of the cultural, you know, ethos. But so, for example, the notions of privacy, like India is more trusting, like we found user groups particularly are more enthusiastic about online commerce and, you know, trust in fintech systems. In Brazil, not so, partly to do with the regulations, partly to do with a variety of, you know, experiences they've had, right? So there's a very different perspectives on that end, you know, race factors in Brazil much more, whereas caste factors in much more, and religion factors much more. But these are sort of, you know, in the end, there's still a sort of solidarity in terms of Global South, like I said, the socio-linguistic and cultural diversity in India. The fact that industries are looking at them as a pilot and to be scaled elsewhere means that whether the Global South, you know, likes it or not, it's getting its own kind of like current pace, but coming from a different end, which is India. So, but on the other hand, many countries, whether it's in Latin America and Africa, have come to their own being, and they are also pushing back. There's a rising culture of entrepreneurship, and they are taking what is being given, but also modifying it in ways that work for them. And the Indian, say, apps and all, they don't care if it's they're not trying to make it an India only, right? They obviously want to resonate, so they're partnering with these different communities. So I see the relationships are more equal than, you know, in terms of partnering, because they obviously don't know the language. So they are real collaborations. So I think it's different, right? Yeah, but there's, like, I mean, Brazil, for example, is very interesting, the way in which it created its internet bill, you know, years ago, is that it actually really, that was something very prescient, is that they actually had 2,000 different civic actors shape the internet bill of Brazil. And why don't we copy that? It was a brilliant effort. And if we could do some kind of legislation in those regards, I mean, it would be amazing, right? So there's so much to learn from across these different communities. We just, yeah, we need to make that effort. So.
Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. If you're around a bit more at the close here, maybe take some more questions from the audience. But let's thank Dr. Paul Arora one more time.
Thank you.
But that's straight all the way live. Change the funky music. I like it. Straight all the way live. Change the funky music.
All right, thank you much. We'd like to one more time thank our sponsors. Hero sponsor Google.
Champion sponsor Bloomberg.
Champion sponsor Meta.
Champion sponsor Microsoft.
Champion sponsor National Science Foundation.
And champion sponsor Yahoo.
Our contributing sponsors, Adobe, Apple, and Autodesk.
And our contributing sponsors, Tableau and Toyota Research Institute.
And our friends of Kai who support us.
As always, thanks to ACM and to SIGCHI for their support of this conference.
And thanks mostly to you all, to our fellow organizers for their persistence, to our student volunteers for their dedication, to our authors, presenters, and attendees for their patience and grace.
We're now very pleased to declare Kai 2022 closed and introduce the chair of the steering committee, Regan Mendrick.
And as Regan has been chairing the Kai steering committee for several years, for those who don't know, this is an important role that helps guide future Kais. She is stepping off that committee, so an extra special round of thanks as she moves to chair emerita status there for all the work that she's done keeping us all together for the past 2 years. So Regan Mandrick.
Well, now I don't have to introduce myself, but what I do get to do is, before we let these people go, I get to talk about them for a bit while they stand here awkwardly, and I'm in Caroline. If you could also come up here and join them awkwardly, that would be great. All right, so for those of you who don't know about the Kai planning process, for the GCs and TPCs of Kai, the work begins like 2 to 3 years in advance of the current conference. So these chairs signed on for this massive role in the before times, like before bedroom closets became our home offices, and before, you know, suits became sweatpants, and before we knew that we weren't going to interact with each other in person for a full 3 years. If they had a crystal ball back then, I'm not sure if they would have signed up, knowing what they were going to have to go through, one has to wonder, actually. They were onboarded when Kai 2020 was being the physical event was being canceled. They were deep in planning when Kai 2021 was pivoting from a virtual conference, from a physical conference to a hybrid conference and then to a virtual conference. And they themselves had to undertake this massive event of planning SIGCHI's largest and most topically diverse meeting, where the only certainty that we had was that everything was bound to change. After consulting with the community, with the SIGCHI Executive Committee, and with the Kai Steering Committee, they made the call that returning to an in-person conference was the right thing to do for our HCI community. But just to make things really easy for themselves, in planning the first big conference since COVID, they also decided that the future of Kai is hybrid. So many people in this room probably know about a little field called CSCW. Here at Kai, we actually call it Interacting Beyond the Individual. But do you know this field? It's the one where we talk about how computers help us connect with each other, the one where everyone knows that virtual meetings are hard, but virtual meetings are hard, but hybrid meetings are ridiculously hard. And the thing is, they know about this too, right? These are leaders in HCI and in CSCW. They know well the challenges that they would face in offering a hybrid experience, but they did it anyways because they knew it was the right thing to do for our community. Which makes me think that if they had a crystal ball back then, knowing about all the uncertainty and the extra challenges associated with planning Kai 22, they still would have signed up anyways. These four were not afraid to make the big... It's a yes. These four were not afraid to make the big moves that are needed to support our community. I know, well, we all know that things didn't always go quite perfectly this week, all the time. But the fact that they went at all is because of the talent, dedication, courage, and tenacity of these people and the team and the entire team that they led. So in the months In the months leading up to Kai, it's a full-time job for the GCs and TPCs, except that I've said over and over to anyone who will listen, it's not a job. It's actually a volunteer position that someone does on top of their regular job. And they do it because they care about our community. They care about creating this brave space for us to disseminate our work, exchange ideas, learn and debate with each other, and connect. And so all of us here are so very grateful, and we really appreciate you.
Oh, you're welcome.
To thank them, we always give them a little gift. So this year what we have is we have some local art by a New Orleans artist that we've purchased, and they get to choose, and we will be shipping it to you, so you don't have to put it in your suitcase. But it's every time you look at it, I hope it's a reminder of this wonderful event that you made happen. Thank you.
Oh.
All right, and
we can go. Thank you. We're done. Thanks, everybody.
And with that, I would like to welcome you to the future and introduce the general chairs of Kai 2023.
This is Kaisa Vananen.
And this is Albert Schmidt, and we are your Kai 23 general chairs. All right, so the theme of Kai 23 is reconnecting. And thank you. And the vision behind this theme is that we can now all as a community, as a Kai community, re-establish the strong connections between people in the hopefully post-pandemic world, and also people, of course, who are not close by physically, but also people online, and also between industry and academia, so that we can all together create good impact for people's quality of life with excellent research and practice. As a curious fact, you can see in this visual theme the bridges and people if you look very closely. And actually Hamburg is the city of most bridges in the whole world. So this kind of visual theme also then gives you the idea of this reconnecting, and we can all work on that together. So to Albrecht.
So Kaisa gave the location already away. We are in Hamburg, Germany, and online. So it will be a hybrid experience. The conference will be taking place from the 23rd to the 28th of April. And if you look in your calendar, that is Sunday to Friday. So we moved the conference by one day to have it in a working weekend to not collide with a holiday. So we are right in the center of Hamburg, and the Congress Center is an amazing place. You see it there. We will have the whole Congress Center. It's a bit a shorter walk, so you could probably go for other walks in the morning. So there's a beautiful lake around, just around the corner. You can do a 1.5 hours walk before going to the conference center. The conference center is next to a high-speed railway station, which is connected to major cities in Europe. And for many of you, you will be able to fly in with one single flight to one of the major airports in Europe and take the train, which leads you literally 3 minutes outside the conference center. And for those of you who haven't seen Hamburg, we brought you in the following video a few impressions.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, aus.
And with this, we bring you our technical program chairs for 23.
All right. This is Anisha Peters.
And this is Tesh Goyal.
And this is Perola Christensen. And we are our technical program chairs for CHI 2023.
So we actually embedded diversity and inclusion into our team as we strive for globalization.
Over to you, Perola.
Hello. The CHI conference is the premier venue for human-computer interaction. CHI has many different venues to cater for different styles of research. Whatever your research style, please submit your best work to CHI 2023. This is the foundation of an excellent conference.
Thank you, Perola. So, our CHI 2023 website is live now. With all of this information, including beautiful pictures of Hamburg, we plan to engage more broadly with different parts of the community, including practitioners just like me. Some call for papers are already up on the website, so get cracking. You briefly got to see some of the diverse members of our team. I would like to invite the rest, so now you get to meet them.
See you in Germany or online.
Welcome.
Alarmgebern, wenn so wer dabei wandert am Horizont. 99 Loch